Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Measure Up webinar. I'm joined here. My name's Matt. I'm joined by my partners in crime, Katherine and Will, on this call. Hi. So we're just going to get a presentation up for you. So you should hopefully be able to see that in a little second. I know some of you have joined as an attendee, and some of you have joined with your video, but yeah, you should all be able to see this. So yeah, welcome to this session on lifting the lid on social valuation. If we go to the next slide. So we're going to be taking you through a few things today. Just a nice kind of gentle introduction, a little bit around the latest thinking around social valuation, about this thing that we've made called Measure Up, which we hope will kind of help you with that. A little overview of it, how to use it, and just making a case really about the emerging importance of stakeholder engagement in this and where we think things are going to go next, both with Measure Up and with social valuation. So that's what we're going to cover. We're going to go for probably about 30 minutes, but we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. There is a Q&A button on your screen. We've got 500 people joining us for this webinar, so we won't be doing the unmute yourself if you fancy asking a question. So if you do, just submit a typed question through the Q&A. And please also do just feel free to use the chat to chat to each other and share any of your thoughts or thinking, and we'll be kind of catching up on that afterwards. And Nil, one of our colleagues here, is also keeping an eye on that chat as well. And yeah, we've got people joining us from all over the place, including Australia, plenty from the UK, some from the US, some from Australia. So yeah, hello, wherever you are. And yeah, let's get cracking. So, just to give you a little bit of background story. So, as I said, my name's Matt. So, my background is in founding social enterprises. So, for the last 20 or so years, I've been involved in or founding organizations whose mission is to fundamentally do something socially positive first, and where kind of profit is either not a motive or certainly a secondary motive. And that means that I've been searching for a long time about the best way to kind of measure what good is and what social good means. So it's unsurprising, perhaps, that I went down a massive and quite nerdy rabbit hole about 10 years ago, exploring this little thing called social value. And as part of that journey, I've met some people with far more expertise than me, including Will and Katherine, who we're fortunate enough to get to hear from shortly. One thing that really sort of struck me in that is that when it comes to trying to kind of measure the impact of organizations, social valuation seems like a fantastic, really logical methodology of doing that. But actually, when I spoke to people that are working with it at the coalface, I found a few kind of interesting and frankly sometimes disappointing things as well. That there was a lot of confusion about what social value was. There's a lot of cynicism about these big numbers that were being claimed by organizations. There was some confusion about whether these numbers, because they're often expressed in financial terms, as we'll hear a little bit more about in a sec, were actual kind of real money or some kind of Disney dollar amount, if you like. And when we kind of scratched the surface a little bit deeper, what we found was that there's actually some really good intentions in the UK, especially. The UK is kind of leading in this area, building social value through the Social Value Act into procurement to really try and encourage organizations to invest in social value and social valuation practices. But actually, that's creating a few kind of perverse incentives to actually pick the biggest number. And that's actually translating to shaping what happens on the ground in our communities, sometimes taking us away from doing work that stakeholders really need and want in our communities, simply because of the way these things are valued. And also some kind of bad practice that's crept in as well, with vested interests kind of capturing areas of the kind of social value market, if you like. And people are finding themselves in the kind of confusing and disappointing position where they're actually putting money from their organizations into doing social good on the ground, but they're actually having to pay even more money to try and measure those things. They're being told they can only measure it in certain ways. They're being told that only a certain set of numbers is valid. When they ask for how those numbers are being generated, they're being told, kind of, don't worry your head about it. You know, these are the numbers you need to use. And that causes a lack of differentiation in the market as well, actually, where people can't who are doing the best practice can't actually show that they're doing the best practice. It makes it into a game where you have to play the game to get the biggest number, and we can lose track of what is the best thing for the communities in which we work. And that also detaches us from what should be happening, which is the people doing the best work should be the ones winning the game. So we got very passionate about that. My organization that I helped to found is called Impact Reporting. We're a bit of software that helps organizations to measure their social value and their environmental value. And we thought, well, we kind of like to do something about this, but we'd like to do it in a different way, a better way. So moving on, that's a little bit of the background story. So we kind of came up with this mission really to build a valuation framework that is more credible. It's a progressive alternative, and that is to say that we're not shy about the fact that we want to do something a bit better. We want to be a bit right on. We want to be there for the people that are doing a good job and want to do the right thing. And part of doing the right thing and doing a good job, we really passionately believe, is taking a stakeholder focused approach. That is, that we're doing this for the people on the ground in our communities who stand to benefit from the work that we're doing, and we're valuing their input and what works for them. So, and these principles, these are not new. These have been, recommended by Social Value UK, Social Value International, for absolutely ages, but they just haven't kind of worked their way into kind of day-to-day practice because of some of those kind of factors that I spoke about before. So, for us, what we're really clear is that we wanted something open and transparent. What we're not going to do is set something up and claim to be something that we're not. So MeasureUp is a partnership. It's a few organizations and a few individuals trying to do something good. We don't profit in any way from MeasureUp. We've given quite the opposite. In fact, I think it's fair to say for everybody in this call, we've given quite a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears to this so far. But we really believe that actually we shouldn't be setting up yet another way to kind of value stuff that is pretending to be some kind of government-backed standard or kind of quango or department or anything like that. We are just being open and plain about what we are, which is some people with some expertise in this area that think it could be done a bit better. And that means that all the values are freely available and transparent. A lot of you on this call, especially if you're UK taxpayers, you have already paid for a lot of these values through publicly funded research, through the Office of National Statistics and other bodies. We want to be pragmatic and practical. This social valuation stuff is an absolute rabbit hole, and actually, there's a lot of people who would like you to not understand it, actually, because actually that allows them to keep a little bit of a fiefdom around that knowledge. We want to say, look, this is the way that we've got a bunch of experts together. We've got some phenomenal people on our advisory board. Some of them are connected to this call right now. So hi, everyone. They are giving us advice about, we reckon in like 9 times out of 10, this is the best way to value something. And here is a plain English description and an example of how you can apply that to your work. And lastly, we want to be sustainable and progressive. So that means making sure that we're working as a partnership. And I think just embodying those values that, we all got into the various sectors. I can see on this call, we've got people from, social enterprises, housing associations, from the National Health Service, from, sustainability consulting. Fundamentally, we're all here because we want to do a bit of good. So it strikes me as odd when you then try and value your stuff that you end up in a bit of a world that feels a little bit shark infested, and we want to de-shark those waters. So that's what we are trying to do, creating a little shark free pond. That's our mission. So moving on, I'm just going to hand over to Will Watt. Will Watt is the founder of State of Life, which is one of the partner organizations in MeasureUp, along with Impact Reporting, just to talk a little bit about what social value is, what this Wellbeing thing is, and how we're embedding that in the work that we're doing. Will.
Thanks, Matt. He didn't explain he was going to say shark infested when we had the run through. That was very funny. Brilliant. So thank you. Yes, so we founded State of Life. I'll explain a little bit about why. We stumbled into, or personally stumbled into, the economics of all of this. We were valuing volunteering and came across, and we're very lucky to work with somebody called, whose nickname in government is God, but Lord Gus O'Donnell. And he was At the time, he was coming out of government and was pioneering this idea of well-being economics. He gives this amazing talk about a speech back in 1968 from Bobby Kennedy around beyond GDP and how GDP measures everything except that which makes life worth living. So what Gus O'Donnell and a lot of other clever people at LSE and the Office of National Statistics were doing was, okay, how do we measure what makes life worth living? And you'll be pleased to know that the UK is the world's leading country at doing so. We're perhaps not the best at implementing it yet, but we're very, very good at it. So we started to look at this and we saw that out there. I think, as Matt said, really, if we go back one slide, you've got the sort of open and transparent. So we started to look at this and started to come across social value, and we could see that, I think, as Matt put a lot better than I can, all of this stuff is out there and freely available. There's really useful unit cost database, which will tell you that a night in hospital is £2,000, or that a year in prison is £40,000. But this was all readily available. And then we've got these amazing data sets from the Office of National Statistics that measure all of our well-being, our life satisfaction, and all things that you need. And yet there was quite a lot of smoke and mirrors behind it. And it was all being dressed up, and essentially it was being dominated by proprietary value banks that were sort of masking this in lots of different ways. So one of our main principles was that we've got to open this up in some way, shape or form. The other thing was, I think it was one of our first blogs about this, was at the time, I think it was 2008, there was a company, a charity called Kids Company, that was claiming to work with 36,000 young people in inner city London. And it was a huge scandal at the time, because what transpired was they weren't working with anybody, they didn't have any evidence. And what we were looking at was, well, there would have been nothing at the time to stop a kids company claiming an enormous social value figure by saying, yeah, we work with 36,000 kids and that's £2,000 a year. And by the way, we stopped 10% of them going to prison, so that's £40,000 added onto that. And those figures would have been absolutely nonsense, but nobody would have questioned them. So we started to set about fixing that, really. The good news is that at the time, from 2010 to 2012, not the good news, at the time, social value wasn't really defined from 2010 when it started to emerge to 2020. So it was, I think Andrew Van Dorn, who runs Hacked, described it just last week, really, as a nascent industry, and it still is. And it perhaps got off on the wrong foot. It wasn't really defined. It left everyone to make up their own definitions, lobbing all sorts of different things in. But now it has been defined by the Treasury in what's called the Green Book. The Green Book, I think it's page 5, describes it as the market effects, so GDP, which is very, very important, plus the impact on the well-being of the population. So it starts to root social value in, yes, jobs, money is really important, but then there's the other benefits on the well-being of the population. It's not an either-or discussion. I think one of the mistakes that Wellbeing made early on was to say, oh, money's not important. Well, it really is. And it's not either-or, it's both of those things together. But there's a really clear definition. And what that means is measuring well-being is fairly fundamental to that. When the Green Book changes and has a definition like that and makes well-being important, they issue what's called supplementary guidance. And we are named advisors on the supplementary guidance on how you measure and value well-being. Our chief economist, Alan Little, actually wrote the Green Book guidance, the supplementary guidance, with a very brilliant lady called Sarah McLennan. It really, this is one slide, but if you do one thing after this call, I would go and read that. It's an absolutely brilliant read. It's really accessible. It explains why wellbeing economics is important. There's a lot of philosophy in it. There's a lot of why are we doing this, and it really is excellent. The Wellbeing is that guidance. We got involved relatively early. It could have gone lots of different ways, but thankfully it settled on this measure of economic value called the Wellbeing. The way we measure our life satisfaction is literally asking a question: how satisfied are you with your life nowadays, out of 1 to 10? A Wellbeing is moving you from 4 to 5 or 6 to 7, is up a point, and it's worth 13,000. I think the favorite thing, and we've got a lot of blogs on this on our website explaining what it is, why it's worth what it is. The thing that we favor is that it's benchmarked very cleverly to the NHS measure of economic value, which is the quality of life year. And that is how the NHS allocates its 180 billion of spending. So you've got something that's really credible, and it's actually really simple and open to use, because all based on these open data sets that the UK has. I think if we go to the next slide, the main thing from us was always trying to shift everybody along a trajectory of standards of evidence. So there is nothing wrong with estimate values that we have on lots of value banks. They're fine, but let's be honest about what they are. They are an estimate of value. They help you make decisions. They guide you. We have a poster on our website called Where's Wellbeing? All the values are in MeasureUp. And it's just to help people orientate themselves on what matters. An example of this would be, we work with a major construction project, Tideway, on their social value of their legacy. Everyone probably on this call measures apprenticeships. We said, look, don't measure that. There's something here that says you work with ex-offenders to help them be employed. That's really valuable. Measure that properly. And that means going from bronze, which is an estimate of value, to silver, where you start to ask people, or start to say, these are the people we actually work with. Yes, the good example of this would be, yesterday we launched a new model of social and economic value for Sport England. Being active is good for everybody. It's about £2,000 a year, but it's worth 3 times more if that person's got a long-term health condition or has a disability. So this is where you can differentiate your values based on who you're working with, which tends to be the biggest determinant of where the greater return on investment is. But the real answer to all of this is if you're claiming to have made people's lives better, let's at least have the decency to ask them whether we did. And so the key thing is really going up to a gold standard, whereas we heard for about 10 years when we were doing this that, oh, collecting data is just too difficult. It's really hard. It's not practical. We can't do it. And to Matt's second point on his slide of just making this practical, that's really what we've worked with Matt and his teams on for the last 5 or 6 years, is how do you make it possible to ask the people you've claimed to deliver social value for whether you actually have. Now, it's not to say this is easy, but we would rather give away the estimate values and be honest about what they are, the estimates, so that you can all start to invest in proper evidence that you did do what you said you were going to do. You know, to the point on collecting data, we collected in the last 2 years over 15,000 responses to wellbeing surveys in Tanzania, Rwanda, and villages in Africa. So you can collect this data, and we've done that using Matt's team and his system. So if you want to ask people in real life whether what you've done has affected them and generated any social value for them at all, you now can. And we would rather you spent your money on that than spending money on pumping out what are essentially freely available estimate values that you can now get from MeasureUp. I think the final point on this is, a lot of people might see this as an extra hassle and a bit of a threat to their big numbers. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go and get the evidence because it's going to make my numbers go down. Everyone on the board is going to get worried that my numbers will shrink. The truth is, if you actually go out and spend the time to ask, if you're doing something genuinely good, the numbers are actually much higher in our experience so far. So you can claim the £2,000 for working with somebody we've made this many people more active. If you do go and ask those people that have got a long-term health condition and that you have worked with to make more active, you will find that the return for them, those people in need, is a lot higher than any of these estimate figures will give you. So if you're doing something genuinely good, go and get the evidence. And that's who we really want to work with. So here's the estimates for free. Go and use the estimates. That's fine. If you don't want to go any further, you don't need to call us. But if you want to go and get some evidence to really try and establish that what you've done has generated real, genuine, authentic social value, then that's where we'd recommend you start talking to us about doing a MeasureUp project. That's me.
Great. Thank you, Will. Thank you very much. And that's great to be able to be introduced by two such eloquent speakers as Matt and Will. And now, unfortunately for you all, you're stuck with me, and I'll be saying very silly things, I'm sure. But so my name's Katherine Manning, and I'm the head of impact practice at Impact Reporting, and I'm the program lead or program director of MeasureUp, and my final sort of related hat is as a board trustee of Social Value International. So I'm very pleased, as a self-confessed social value and impact management geek, to pick up on these practitioner-y, method-y points that I think are really exciting and important. Maybe other people would less so, but I definitely think they're very important. So just some things to highlight for our practitioners in the room. The values that we're going to go and look into in a moment, they include a variety of different types of value, so well-being, economic, fiscal and environmental. I know when we talk about value, we immediately, the mind can get pulled along to money. Value isn't money, it's the worth of something, it's the relative importance of something in relation to other things. So there is monetized values represented in the MeasureUp value set, but we're also trying and will continue to try to include other examples of non-monetary values. The values that are presented that are monetary are all inflation adjusted to 2023 prices. We've got overclaiming guidance for all of the levels, so linked to Will's point before about that worry about going from the big estimates through to the actual evidence. One thing that we should all be thinking about is how confident are we that that value is actually down to us. So we're working on how to actually be thinking about that in a good way or a reasonable way at these different levels of application of practice. And another point I think is core to what we're doing, and it is embedded into the principles that we've got for MeasureUp as well, is that the aim with publishing this openly is to be transparent at the source, but also to help to support people to be transparent in use. So as you use this value source or any other one, be clear on what you're doing, be clear on your assumptions and the limitations and risks that are associated with the approach. And we want to do that, and we want to help people to do that as well. So that's my practitioner-y bits, and now the exciting whistle-stop tour of MeasureUp itself. So hopefully this is going to work in a whizzy way, and it has. So this is welcome to MeasureUp. So here's our beautiful welcome page, and I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour around the website itself, and hopefully through doing that help people to be able to navigate it and work your way through, excuse me, a lot of the information on there. So here we are, our welcome page. So first of all, there's some information sections of the website. So we've got an About Us page, and you can learn more about where MeasureUp came from, the ideas behind it, a lot of what Matt's been talking to so far. Some more information about the founding partners, so impact reporting, state of life and PRD. Introduction to our wonderful and amazing advisory group, some info on crediting MeasureUp, and a plea to all of you to reach out. We want this to be collaborative, so there's lots of get in touch and give feedback mentioned throughout the website. Next, we've got a methodology page. So obviously one of my favourite sections of the website, because it's where all the geeky stuff sits. And under here, we've got a sort of overall description of the approach behind the methodology that we're then using to inform the values that are actually published in the value set. We've got some overarching principles that guide what it is that we're doing within that continuing development of MeasureUp. And we're also trying, and will continue to try, to align that methodology with the Social Value International social value principles as well. There's some descriptions about well-being and the well-be, like that Will has introduced us to, and then some description of the different valuation, or sorry, the different value categories and the different frameworks that that the values are aligned to, frequently asked questions, and more. There will be more that gets published in here as we continue to develop guidance and resources to support people's practice. We then have a how-to guide. So this is, we'd recommend reading this page before diving into the values, because it outlines our recommendations about how to actually use these. So how to choose which outcomes and activities would align to what you're doing, and then diving into the actual values, and a description of those four different levels that Will had introduced us to before. And then the most exciting part of the website, the values page. So obviously you click on the values tab, and then you can whiz down and have a look at the value set itself. So for this, within the set on each of these cards, you'll see, for anyone who's met me, you'll be not surprised that I love all of this, because it's all such lovely colours. Luckily, the colours are actually meaningful, so they align to the well-being dimension that particular value sits within. On each of the value cards, you'll also see the name, the code. So all of the values, they're individually coded by the well-being dimension that they've come from, and then the number of that's in that set so far. So, for example, attendance at religious services sits within what we do, and it's the third value under what we do. And there's sometimes there's some subcategories as well. So this will be under what we do within the community. And there's also a little picture, which is always nice. Now, I like just flicking around all of the values. I like all the pretty pictures and the lovely colours, and feel proud of myself when I can find the right one. Not everyone is as daft as me, though. So we also have some ways that you can navigate within the value set. So you can search through or filter the values by the specific sustainable development goal that you're interested in or trying to align to. You can also filter by the UK central government social value model. So that would be most meaningful to people who work in government, particularly in procurement, or those that are suppliers to government. And in there you can choose or filter by the particular theme that you're interested in. So, for example, tackling economic inequality, or go to the next level down and filter by the policy outcome. So creating new businesses, new jobs, and new skills, or by the MAC, or the Model Award criteria. So that's the sort of sub-level that sits underneath that policy outcome. Finally, you can filter by the well-being category that each of the values sits in under this filter by category. Oh, I should have said you could also just search by the outcome name. So there is a filter function by that as well. So for this example, we're going to filter by where we live. And see, if we clicked on there, then 5 values pop up for us. And we're going to take a more in-depth look at this one here. So WWL 3.1, so where we live 3.1, access to green space. And inside of each of these values, once you've clicked on the card, there's an explanation of what that value is relating to. So the activity or the outcome, some information there more, but broadly of what that is and why it's important environmentally and or socially, and therefore why is it being included in this this social value valuation set. Then, as you skim down the page, you'll come up with this section where it's called the key value, and this is the key value in relation to that particular outcome or activity. So in this case, a monetised social value of £3,600 relates to one person having or strongly agreeing that they're within easy walking distance of green space. And then there's a description of where that's come from that sits underneath that value. So with this particular example, this has been calculated in using the Wellbeing valuation method that we'll introduced us to before, the Wellbeing method, published in the UK Green Book. So that's sort of all explained underneath the value. And then as we whiz down the page, we've got the 4 levels, so bronze, silver, gold, and gold plus. And there's indicative, effort and accuracy bars here. Ironically, they're not 100% accurate. We're not saying that this is 100%, this would be the effort, and 100%, like that's absolutely what the accuracy would be, but it's just to indicate, you know, if as you move up and through these levels, you will have to put more effort into the approach, but the benefit is that you get a more accurate value estimation out of that. So then as we flick down into each of the levels, so first of all, the bronze, we have quite simply an explanation of how you would apply that value. So you multiply the proportion of your participants that you expect to gain easy access to green space by the key value, so by 3,600 at this, for this example. And then there's an example of how you might do that in a little bit more detail. So for this example, somebody's got a programme where they're transforming a disused building site into a park, think this is going to affect 200 local residents, so you can then take number of people we think are going to be affected and times the amount that we think that will actually change, you know. So in this case we've said that you could estimate about 75% of that 200 would be affected, so you times the value by that smaller number. Then we move on and we go to the silver level. So it's the same format through each of the levels. There's an overall explanation of how to apply that value or to calculate that value for that particular level. So the high level idea for silver levels is that we're trying to adjust the bronze level value using differentiators. So if we think that top level value would relate to a generic person or a generic thing, at the silver level we'd be saying, well, actually we realize that different people might experience things differently, or if it's an environmental value, the actual environment isn't going to be 100% the same in all examples. So what ways could we change that value to make it a bit more accurate? So in this case, we'd be thinking, okay, at the bronze level, that base value relates to a change where it was somebody going from neutral up to strongly agree. So they've gone, that's the generic value that we've applied. So for the silver value, you might say, well, actually, not everybody's going to have that amount of change. So perhaps there's some people that are neutral or disagree, some people agree, some people strongly agree, and you can start to make that value a bit more specific to the change that you expect your group to experience. And then we've got gold, and this is where we start to capture actual evidence. So this value is relating to people's experience. So this is that talk to people, go and ask those people themselves. So, you know, measure the actual amounts of difference that access in green space makes to people's lives. Under each of the gold sections, there is some general information about good practice in terms of engaging with stakeholders or with people from an impact practice perspective. So there's some examples of types of questions that we could or should be asking when we're engaging with people, including some key questions that are from the ONS relating to overall well-being. And then there's also the specific question that relates to adjusting this particular value. So in this case, it's relating to access to green space. So the question you need to include is this question about a local green space as being within easy walking distance. Then we've got the Gold Plus level. So at this level, there's information and advice about how to calculate your counterfactual. So what would have happened anyway if you hadn't done that program, initiative, activity, and then being able to adjust the value that you've been calculating at the gold level. Like I said before, flipping into this, we're also advising under the methodology page that there's considerations of that what would have happened anyway at all of the levels. It's just that as you've got to this gold plus level, the estimation of that and the evidence that you'd be using to inform that estimate, we expect that to be more full, more complete, a bit more complex. So there's different levels of the application of that estimate at the different levels of complexity of the valuation practice. And then finally, I'll just point out, in line with that, transparent at the source and then transparent at use. We've published all of the data sources where these values have been developed from. One of the things that we're trying to do and the principles that we've got guiding the development of MeasureUp is that we're using open data that's already available, research that's been published, so that we can gather that together and share that wider, and to help other people who are going to be using this to be able to be more clear and transparent about where they're getting their valuation estimates, and when they're actually using them in practice. So that is the end of our whistle stop tour. So I'm going to flick us back to our presentation seamlessly, I'm sure you'll all agree, and I'll be passing back to Matt to walk us through the last part of our session.
Thanks for that, Katherine. So hopefully that whistle stop tour gave you a really good idea of what we actually mean by MeasureUp and made good on what we said about the fact that we're kind of being open and transparent about everything. We've really worked hard to try and make that information as accessible as possible, and I hope, yeah, that was reflected in what Katherine explained. Do take some time to have a browse of the website, and then after that, well, where to next? Well, this is where we could do with your help. These values are open for you to use, and they're available. Up to now, the partners that are listed, so that's impact reporting, state of life, and PRD, have been the ones that are investing in sort of researching, generating these values, writing them up. But we would love to get a little bit of help from you on that. So certainly take these values, use them, put them in whatever software you're using, use them to deliver whatever consultancy you want to use. However, if you can help us, we'd really love your help in really kind of two key ways. You can help us by not only using the values and spreading the word, but you can also donate values to us. So if you've done some research and you would like to give that research a life beyond just that kind of one report that you've got it in, or that one reference that you're using, then we're actually really open for you to get in touch with us and for us to feature that value on our website, so long as it meets the kind of criteria of what we mentioned before, those principles. And if there's a value that you would love to have, then we were also open to you talking to us about sponsoring a value. So we're doing these, not to make loads of cash, but simply because we would love to be able to fill that page that you saw and give Katherine lots more joy by having lots more pretty colors and icons on that values page. So we've actually analyzed a load of data that's in our platform, about 1,500 different activities that hundreds of different organizations are doing to try and come up with what the most common things that are going on that we can value. However, if you think we've missed something, or you think there's something interesting for us to value there, and you have some money to put towards that, and you might be surprised about how little it will take, then do reach out to us, do get in touch, and we can feature that value on the website, include your logo and a credit to you if you want, and make that value freely available to the whole social value sector, which I think we can all agree would be a great win. So yeah, we're going to see in a second some contact details on the screen, which you can use to do that. And if you are interested in us to get in touch, then you can also, pop those into the chat. One of my favorite couple of values that we've seen that State of Life very kindly donated values about faith and the participation in faith and how that is very influential on people's well-being. That's something that's not often sort of considered, but it's a huge part of many people's lives in our communities. And also a recommendation that we got that we've actually researched about digital inclusion and what the value of giving people kind of laptops and internet access is, which is something a lot of people are engaged with, but we didn't see a lot of guidance about valuing that published. So we're going to move on next to our Q&A. So, but before we do that, just to signpost us, if you don't get time to ask a question, or if there's a question that you would like to ask us in private for some reason about a project that you're working on or something you're looking to value, here's a little bit of a kind of finger post about where you might want to go. We are going to share an email address for Lauren Walker in the chat now, who is somebody that you can email, and she will be triaging all of your queries to the right place. But the organizations involved are Impact Reporting, which is Katherine and my organization. We are software that helps people keep track of their impact, measure it, report it, manage it. And of course, the MeasureUp values are all built into that platform already. We have State of Life, Will's organization, that do valuation research, stakeholder engagement, and can basically answer pretty much any question you can throw at them about what is the value or impact of a project or initiative on a community or a place. PRD do strategy and placemaking and planning. So if you are involved in that, like Argent, one of our users, for example, then they are a great place to go to talk about that side of things. Often social value is a huge part of kind of procurement and planning when it comes to placemaking, construction, etc. So that's why they're in the gang. And of course, we all know and like each other and we get on. So if you've got something that cuts across all of that stuff, as Will mentioned before, then we can potentially team up and help you. Great. So yeah, we'll just leave some contact details on here, and we will now turn it over to questions. I've been keeping an eye on these as they've been coming in. We've got 15 minutes, so hopefully we can get through some of these. So yeah, a couple about links to websites, slides, recordings. This recording will be sent out to everyone that's registered, and you will be able to forward that on if you want. We will be sharing slides. We have shared a link to the website in the chat as well. So yeah, and I think we've replied to those questions. Yeah, next up, if we take a question about the number of values and whether they will increase over time. I've given you a bit of clue about how we will look to increase that, but Katherine, do you maybe want to speak about that and the number of values we've got and how it might increase?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so we're looking as we progress with the continuing development of MeasureUp to develop the values in two directions. One is going to be in breadth. So I think somebody had noted the number of cards that are on the website at this point in time. So we've got 21 published at this point in time. We've got a few in draft that we're checking, and then we'll be posting about them. So one way is that we're looking to actually expand that full set. Things that will be informing that are we want to make sure that we've got a good span, or at least value set that covers all of the 10 dimensions of well-being. Also be informed by some of the key drivers of social value activity within the UK. So procurement's a massive driver within the UK. So stuff that's important from a national government priority perspective, we'll be looking to see what could or should be in here that will then be most useful for people trying to value stuff from that procurement or supplier or buyer perspective. And then the other area would be things that are important to you, things that are important to those that are using MeasureUp. So whether that's with any of people that are engaging with our companies directly, or just using MeasureUp on your own, you know, reach out, tell us what you'd like in there, and collaborate. And that's one of the ways. And the other way that we'd be looking to expand is actually into the depth. So you'll see, if you start flicking through MeasureUp, there's examples at the silver level of ways that you could differentiate, but they don't cover everything, right? That's the things that we've been able to pull out that are most important based on the research that we've got available at this point in time. So we'd like to keep on working on that. And one particular area that we're all committed to as the partners and the advisory group is around diversity, equity and inclusion and accessibility. And so there's a lens that we want to take and want to actively prioritise around showing the difference in experience based on our different characteristics. So potentially starting with the protected characteristics as outlined by the Equalities Act, but then also socioeconomic status or location within the UK. You know we have different experiences in different geographies, for example, or in rural versus urban areas. So these are some of the ways that we're looking at expanding the value set. We know it's not complete. We definitely need engagement and help to keep this going, but that's some of the ways that we're going to, that we're focusing on as we move forwards.
Thanks, Katherine. Will, I'm going to pass this one to you because I know that you're doing some really interesting emergent work in this area. Do your outcomes extend to children and young people? Asks Jamie. As a children's charity, they've found that research in these is sometimes at its infancy and there aren't reliable outcomes to hand that capture changes in child and young person well-being.
Oh, yeah, they do. I'm going to put the link into the chat, but we've just done some work which is with Ofcom on the online harms bill, and we were asked to look at all the potential outcomes for wellbeing children. Alan Little, who I mentioned earlier, has been developing with London School of Economics a Wellbeing version for children. There's a blog on our website on that, but I would start probably with the link I've just sent you. There's a really good digest, but the short answer is yes. The measures that exist, there's open questions that are transferable to children.
Thanks, Will. So I'm going to move to a question now about local authorities and how some local authorities mandate the use of certain frameworks. So yeah, this is your question, Sarah, if you're still with us. So how do we move forward from the fact that, you know, a lot of valuation happens with particular frameworks because that's what's mandated by local authorities? It's a really good question, and yeah. We're not here necessarily to say that MeasureUp should be the thing that should be mandated. Instead of that, what I would absolutely love to see, if there's any local authorities that are on the call, is a local authority that's brave enough to perhaps also signpost a MeasureUp as an option of a framework that could be used as well as in order for somebody to submit a bid or an invitation, a response to an invitation to tender by a local authority for valuing the social value aspect of that tender. But yeah, the truth is that's a huge constraint in practice at the moment, and it's one that we would love to see a bit more kind of plurality on, and I'm sure we will get there. Great. I've got a question here from Rob about volunteering and the way that we're valuing volunteering at the moment, which I think is a really important one to address, and hopefully shows that we are always up for listening to feedback. So just scrolling to find your question, but essentially I think Rob was saying, how come we're taking the input value, the salary of the volunteer in the example on our website, into account? How does somebody that earns a bigger salary end up creating more value by painting a fence from someone on a lower salary? I think we all probably know people in our lives that are paid very big salaries that would be absolutely terrible at painting fences. So yeah, Katherine, do you want to perhaps give a bit of context on that in terms of kind of corporate volunteering versus sort of, you know, everyday volunteering?
In relation to the value that we've got in the framework.
Yeah, I think
Or
we give an example, don't we? That we're saying that there's kind of high value volunteering and kind of low value volunteering and everything in between. But perhaps there's a really good suggestion there in terms of what kind of volunteering are they doing is really important to kind of factor in, isn't it? Like, are they using their kind of salaried skills
mm,
to do this, or is this actually them escaping the day job to do something relatively low skilled?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's I haven't got the value right in front of me, so excuse me if I say anything that's not 100% accurate to the exact text that's on there. But that is one of the points with moving from the bronze level to the silver is the ability to adjust that economic representation of the value of the volunteer based on the work that they're doing and their skill level. So there may be some adjustments that you can make based on that. I mean, the other side of the value that's in MeasureUp is the well-being side, and I think I'd seen somebody in the chat asking about that, a really important question about where does the value sit, who's this for? And I completely agree with that question. And we should all be asking it, and thinking about that when we choose the valuation approach that's most suitable for what we're trying to represent. So what do we value to whom? And I mean, I've done it very high level, that practitioner-y bits at the beginning, that, are we talking about fiscal value, so value to the state? Are we talking economic to the economy as a whole, or even, economic value to the individual? Is it environmental value, or is it actually well-being value to the person, to the community, or nationally speaking? And those are different things. So being clear on what value you're trying to represent to whom will help to inform what valuation approach and which of the values is most appropriate to use.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to come to you, Will, because I know you've got your hand up. Although your video is frozen on mine, but hopefully you can still speak. I don't know if there's anything you want to address about that point, and also perhaps the question from Karen about a quick question about double counting. And if someone has improved access to green space, there must be an overlap with improved well-being. How do we ensure that we don't double count these impacts? Are you with us, Will?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, but volunteering, we've done loads on. There's the main thing to look at is the well-being value. The cost replacement and how that varies for different levels is incredibly difficult to do. There is a big study coming out from DCMS. I think it might be just before the end of the year, that's looking at all of that. We did some work for the UN on how to value volunteering, but it does get a bit complex in terms of where you count the hours and the cost replacement and who to. But I won't bore you with that now. But it's it's a good question. What was the double counting on green space?
Just about the value of it from I guess double counting the well-being impacts of access to green space, as well as the improved well-being. So if someone has improved access to green space, there must be an overlap with their improvements in well-being. How to ensure we don't double count the impact of improved access to green space and the well-being combined?
Gosh, I would imagine they're the same thing. The well-being value of access to green space is what you would count. It depends whether you're going to add in. There's a different way of valuing green space with natural capital. So is it the overlap between the two? The questions. I mean, it's probably not one for now. It's probably not one for now. It would yeah. The argument goes that is ongoing and is that really the well-being benefits, and the reason that it's Gus O'Donnell and people a lot cleverer than us have come up with it, is really the question to all of the values was, well, why is that good for anybody? And the ultimate thing is it makes your life better. So that's why there's quite a big international coalition, that's the wrong word, coalescing around well-being as the beyond GDP. There's GDP and then there's well-being. And the thinking really, and this is Pulitzer Prize winning stuff like Danny Kahneman and people like that, is, the answer to all the other questions is, well, it's the benefit to the individual, the utility value to your life satisfaction. So just measure that and count that, and then you're not double counting. short. That's a really short, bad answer. Probably
No,
not
that's great.
as clever as it could be.
Thanks. Just we're keeping the theme. A lot of the questions we've got are a bit technical, so I might need some firepower from you both on this one. But Sarah has asked, has indicated her agreement with stakeholder involvement. However, that there's been some hesitancy she's observed in applying Wellbeing valuations in practice, because it can actually be very difficult for individuals to move 1 point change on the life satisfaction scale. That despite interventions, lots of people might rate their life satisfaction similarly afterwards. And do we have examples or data or case studies that does show an improvement in life satisfaction in the UK after a specific intervention? Just going to sort of tease that apart, actually, because I think there's two elements to that. There's one is, how do you ensure that people kind of accurately report the change that's happened and don't just fall into saying the same number? And then I think there's a kind of a wider sort of philosophical question there, which is kind of perhaps, isn't it really bloody hard to improve somebody's life satisfaction, you know, by a 1 point in 10 over a whole year? And the answer is it is. And we kind of think that's a good thing, in the sense that we can make these values a little bit more accurate than saying, actually, just because somebody's a bit happier leaving, I don't know, a coffee group that they're going to attend once, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to last for you know, an entire year. Will, do you want to jump in on that?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true, but there's lots of other drivers of well-being that are measured in the data sets that we have in this country. So you mentioned it. So loneliness is a big negative. So there's lots of different outcomes that you might want to measure. You might want to mental health using WebWebs. You might want to measure trust in others, belonging. You might want to measure confidence in young people, resilience, to the question on children's well-being. There are tons of other measures that are all measured regularly in this country that are drivers of life satisfaction. So it might be, yes, you're not affecting life satisfaction immediately, but you are addressing physical activity, you're addressing loneliness immediately by getting somebody to be part of a sports club. You can measure all four things. So you're not restricted to just measuring life satisfaction alone. That's where the life satisfaction is, where the value can be applied. But it doesn't mean you're not having on impacts that can't be measured. And to the question of do things shift life satisfaction? Yes, they really do, is the answer to that. Again, it goes back to something we were saying earlier. If you're working with people, one of the ways that people talk about well-being, and we prefer this actually, is avoiding a misery. So well-being, the criticism is it sounds a bit like a Pilates class, and all the traditional economists are like, yeah, you know, all a bit sniffy about it, but really it's about avoiding misery. So if you can help somebody avoid misery, you can have massive impacts and massive values, to the point of, we did a study to the question that was in the chat about can you collect from data from people that are slightly vulnerable. We did a big study with, well, not a big study, but done a few studies now, people with quite severe mental and physical disabilities, helping them get more active. You can shift them from 5 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 on life satisfaction. So if you're working with the right people, as we said before, doing something really good that genuinely makes their life better, then yes, the answer is yes, definitely. But not everything does. Yeah.
And that's really what we want, isn't it? We want actually these numbers to be reflective of what the actual change being created is. And we often think the really good stuff is being undervalued, and actually some of the kind of less effective stuff is being overvalued, and we're really trying to kind of, you know, work towards shifting that. We're just going to, I'm conscious we're just at time now, but I'm just going to take one more question because I think it's a quickie, which is from David Golofsky, because I saw you had your hand up for a while, David, and you've submitted a question with a Q&A, which is, how do you create the questions to gather evidence? And just to give you a response to that, we've actually got example questions that are on the guidance on the website. A lot of these questions have been come up with by boffins at places like the Office of National Statistics, and they're designed to be asked in a way that makes them very non-leading and in a very even-handed way. And actually, we believe aligning to those established questions means that you're able to cross-reference your responses to other organizations' kind of benchmarks, which is also a nice perk of that as well. So have a look at the guidance, particularly under the gold and the gold plus sections on each value page. Great, that's all we've got time for. I'm aware that there's a few questions we haven't got to, but I think I've covered the main sort of themes here. We will keep responding to them in the chat or the response option on here. So do just keep an eye on this meeting in your teams, and you should see some responses come through. And yeah, do reach us, do get in touch with us. We will share a link, an email address again in the chat. that you can email any questions, any suggestions to us. But thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks for your feedback, both the really positive feedback and also some of the challenging feedback for this. We massively appreciate it, and we absolutely don't want to hide from any good suggestions you've got. So keep them coming. So yeah, with that, we will say thank you. Look forward to seeing some of you again. If you do have any ideas for any future sessions you'd like to see, maybe deep diving on some of this stuff, or maybe even going more basic, do let us know as well in the chat, and we'll see if we can organize some of these other webinars, because we've been overwhelmed by the response to this one. So yeah, thanks everybody, and yeah, hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.